Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Be More podcast, where we try to inspire you to be a little bit more of every role within the Salesforce community and beyond. For today's episode, we are exploring what it takes to be more iterative. And I'm joined today by Andrew. So, Andrew, are you okay to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah. Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me. Andrew Ermon, and I am in the Salesforce consulting space as a independent shop. Started with a firm in DC and then left it to kind of just start off on my own. Came from a background of analyst roles in various companies and have a business degree background. And then, obviously enterprise software, exposed to a lot of that, and Salesforce caught my attention, and kind of just fell into that, and then got the consulting role, and I've been in it for about 5 years now.
Thinking about now being more iterative as a role, what words would you use to describe that? Like, how does that fit into perhaps the role of a consultant or an architect or an admin?
A little bit of risk propensity, right? You've got to lean into a little ambiguity and unknown, and trust the process. Saying don't let perfection be the enemy of good. And I've just realized with the thing that I've really stressed with prototyping or iterating, that cyclical method, I think, is extremely valuable on the Salesforce platform specifically because of its robust declarative functionality. Right, we're not having to write and test code to just like change where a button is on a page. We go to a Lightning page editor and click and drag it around. Code written. But if you're creating a real app, you would have to have written new code and then gone through all of this lifecycle development work of like proper testing and stuff like that. And so because of that, I feel Salesforce specifically is a really good tool for valuable and sustainable and scalable iterative development.
Yeah. Awesome. And thinking about this now as a role of kind of being more iterative, how does this interact with other roles? And maybe we'll kind of pivot on the question here a little bit, but thinking about how it would be different if you're an admin versus a developer versus a consultant. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, because being independent and being little old me, right? I'm wearing all the hats, right?
Yeah.
Doing the scoping, pipeline negotiations, and PMing and scheduling, everything, right? The whole team is me. It's a good question because I've kind of focused my thoughts on development, right? So in the build stage, but you're right. I have, now that I'm thinking about it, I have started to use that same concept in the other stages of a project in the consulting world. So, like, for example, scoping and negotiations, I've tried to iterate on how I communicate things to clients. They don't know what they don't know. If you've never used Salesforce before, and the whole idea of scoping is to not solution design and not get into the details, but a lot of times in reality, they might already have Salesforce. Maybe they need like an overhaul. They've been 10 years in it and they are on Salesforce Classic, and they need to just basically do its complete renovation. It's almost like a new build. But they know Salesforce, so you can't get them out of that. And so I try to, explain also resource constraints, right? We all know or should know how it goes by the book, right? You do the scope requirements gathering, discovery and design, current state, future state, gap analysis, build out, testing, releasing, deploying, and then, post-release training and et cetera and support. That's great and all, but like a lot of organizations, they're resource constrained. I focus in the nonprofit social impact sector. So that's particularly, they don't have an IT team. They rarely have the technical computer database programming background resources. I am that person in their mind. I'm talking to an experienced fundraising director who knows how to manage donors. So iterating on how I can appropriately communicate what I need to say to them to let them know the risks of trade-offs that are involved in our world, right? We won't spin up a partial copy and a merge and a sandbox. Here's what could happen and what could result. And so I've done a lot of using tools like video recordings and building out of templates that I've tweaked over time to kind of streamline that and make it a little more sustainable.
I guess part of that process is ultimately doing something initially and then repeating it and improving on it over time, right? And perhaps during a typical project, if that exists, you'd kind of have to get the client on board with that way of thinking too, like perhaps an MVP approach. We'll do it this way for now, and in the future we can look at, I don't know, integrating another system and doing it a different way. Do you have any thoughts about kind of the skill set it takes to get the client on the same page? Yeah.
Great question. Yes. Great question. Yes. I think first it's important to know your audience.
Oh,
One thing I've learned is like I might get in the door through a certain channel. Say I met so and so at a conference or on a community board, and I bumped into the admin and we started DMing, and then they're like, "Cool, we want to bring you on board in a full time." Maybe I met the director.
mhm.
Someone, So I think first is like, who's your primary source of contact, and how do you need to communicate to them? But then ultimately figuring out the decision makers of who are the ones like determining and signing off on whether this happens or not. And yeah, so I think part of the process of getting them on board is I don't know if you know the book Give a Mouse a Cookie. It's a children's book. Essentially, the little mouse asks for a cookie, and they gave him a cookie, and then he's, oh, can I have a napkin? Can I have a glass of milk? Can I
Right.
have another cookie? Can I have a Pepto Bismol? My tummy hurts.
Yeah.
And right. So I try to figure out what's the cookie for those key stakeholders, to just show them a glimpse of what that light at the end of the tunnel could be, as like a surprise and delight. Classic like executive level is analytics, right? Reports and dashboards.
Mm.
If you can spin up in a sandbox just like some sleek looking, pulling out all the stops with all the different types of charts and yada yada yada. It doesn't even have to have good data. It doesn't have to be ready to go at all. It just needs to look like a
Yeah.
wire, and then that then triggers that light bulb for them of like, that would be awesome. That's valuable to me. Now I have context and grounding. And then you can say, yeah, like over these next 3 phases, this is what I'm going to give you. Versus, operationalized people, like people that are actually cranking out the letters and sending them the campaigns and yada, yada, yada. People in the operations,
Yeah.
they want to see user experience. So like screen flows is huge. Like I'll spin up a data screen flow for like what used to take them hours of clicking the new button or,
Yeah.
going on. I'll spin up like a report with inline editing, and they're like, hey, you can now check this box
Yeah.
for all your records. And then they're like, wow, this is awesome. And I'm like, yeah, I can do this times 100 if you give me the timeline I need to get you there. And so that builds that momentum and builds that buy-in.
I think in particular, I'm now thinking in my mind as somebody as a child used to absolutely hate Pepto Bismol. It's about not giving the client too much, making them have an upset stomach, like in metaphor terms, really.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where my brain currently is with what you said, and I think that really connected. And perhaps part of this is about the client's maturity as well. Like if they have distinguished kind of ways of working and processes and policies, like if they have an existing org and you're going in there and you have to comply with their rules about deployment, you would be talking to them differently than if it was a new org, and perhaps you're even debating whether or not you need that staging environment or whether you can do without it, right? Do you think that's important too?
Yeah, I think understanding and assessing like the constraints of the organization is important. But I also think that, if you just are given just the access of, let me spin up a sandbox and just show you something real fast, right? And like, and because it's on this platform, we can, those of us who are good at our jobs, do dashboard, screen flow, like little new app homepage, spinning up a really sleek looking record page, like all those things are really easy to do when all those other risks and constraints are out of the way and just free flowing, like in a trial org, and you're just like building, not
Yeah.
worrying about testing and constraints and get it. And if you start with that, it allows you to produce quicker, and also then gives them something, and then they will want to eliminate those barriers to entry for you. They're like, I want that. So I'm going to go now on my own and actually do whatever it needs to be done to make sure this happens. And that's a different kind of engagement at that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think kind of the value of showing the client something or a potential something is super powerful as well, because you then kind of get them on the same page. And ultimately, if things go really well and you're aligned, as I said, they then start to feed you what else they need. Like in particular, well, actually, we need to report on this, so we're going to need these fields or
Yep.
whatever it is, and
Yep.
it kind of helps. Do you think it kind of helps to feed the iterative like nature of the project?
I do, and I know a lot of purists out there are going to be thinking like, no, you're like leading into solution design, right? We're like narrowing, like discovery is supposed to be more broad, and you're supposed to keep it narrative with the user story, as a blank, I want to, so that, right? But now, Andrew, you're giving them a dashboard and basically teasing them and like pulling them into this one solution. And I would say two things. Number one, yes, philosophically, that is, the way you would do that, right? But we live in a world of resource constraints on time and money and people. And we already know we're working in Salesforce. So, like, why would we even tease somebody with letting them talk about and spin their wheels about something that is 100% not going to happen? Like, that's a Ferrari that you would need the Tableau and the Marketing Cloud and the Data Cloud and Einstein Copilot, and you don't have the budget for that, nor the technical capacity,
Yeah.
nor the organizational readiness for that. So, like, why would we even bill them for discovery time to collect those requirements that we know that we're just going to come back to and be like, I hear you say this. This is what we'd have to do, and this is how much time and money. And they're not. So instead, I'm going to get an easy early win, and then give them that context to open them up, because they know more than I do about like job to be done, right? And so if I can give them, knowing kind of high level what their budget and technical capacity and timeline is, I high level know kind of what those constraints are. And so then I'm just going to be like, okay, I'm gonna do what's best and like give them something that I think would work for those constraints, and then we can go from there. And it does elicit a lot better feedback. Which, when you're an independent consultant, just me, like I don't have three people to bounce ideas off of to like flush out every little nuanced detail to make sure that I feel like, cool, I have everything I need to build the solution exactly how they want it. And even teams that have 5 or 10 people doing it are still going to miss stuff, right? That's why you do rounds of testing, UAT round 1, UAT round 2, right? Because you're not going to get it right the first time. So if you're not going to get it right the first time, it's never going to be perfect. Prototyping has proved scientifically that makes a better product at the end anyway. Let's just be more lean and efficient. Just be like, we know the industry, we know the platform. You're not a snowflake, right? Even though they think they are. We get enough, just like high level start, and we spin up a trial board or a sandbox and just start churning out a few things to get those juices flowing.
I agree with that as well in terms of the solution thing. Sometimes you need to tease the solution to understand the requirement or to extract the requirement. And naturally, hopefully we're in a line here. You would use a tool like a prototype or a trial or something like that to extract those requirements and then write those requirements in a way, or those user stories in a way where they are solution agnostic.
And you can then figure out like all the other things of like, oh, well, I need to be viewing that information on my mobile because I'm doing that when I'm and then you're like, cool, put on the mobile. And they're like, I wasn't able to access it when I tested out your prototype. It looks cool when I was at home, but then when I was out in the field, I couldn't access it because they have no connectivity in the field, right? Oh, so we need an offline ability to store that, cache it in the device. Cool, we got there. And there's so many checklists and tools out there to be like, these are the questions you need to ask to data volume, like entering the data, who needs to view the data. But like, I mean, we've done this enough. Like, you're always going to miss something, and even if you don't, you took so much time and energy to get everything that you needed. Versus,
Yeah.
like, I found that it's so much more efficient to just start with prototypes. Not to mention, people love testing out like fun new things that excite them about the future product, right? So you're building buy-in and engagement. You're also kind of building some trust and your skill sets, right? That you can
Yeah.
do this really quickly. But then you're also just getting to the answer, I think, a bit quicker. And there are some risks involved, like you were saying, like if somebody says this user story, there are several paths, and that's just about figuring out kind of when you have enough to get going. So maybe, they say as a regional manager, I need someone to see all my, opportunities for each of my sales reps so that I can meet with them when I'm out in the field and talk about their performance. Different directions we could go there. And so, I would ask a few more follow-ups to kind of get a little bit further, and that's just getting your feel and kind of doing this long enough to kind of know when you're good enough, when you can stop and say, okay, this is enough to do a prototype.
Thinking about this as somebody that's watching this episode or listening to it, what tips, advice would you give to that person looking to kind of be more iterative?
I would say it almost has to become a lifestyle or a mindset that you do, right? It's not a switch that you can just turn off and on. So it's a habit, it's a muscle you got to flex enough times to make it more natural and to get good at it too, right? If it's a skill you've never used regularly, you got to do it more so you can get better at it. So one thing is just like knowing there's going to be some learning curve and some pain in between now and the future. I do believe you need to have a strong technical fundamental skill set to do this well. Okay, we're good to go. Like that little switch is like a very feely skill that you just get over time. I definitely didn't have it when I first started in the space. I remember writing out hundreds of user stories as the associate on a project, and I'm just grinding out hundreds and hundreds of user stories, and I'm like, how do we get this? How do we go from here? Like this is overwhelming. Like what? This doesn't make sense. So I will say it's like not for newbies, and if you're new to the space and new to this kind of role in software development, don't try this at home kind of thing. From when it comes to like making it a lifestyle is like, just think of ways, for me, I'm kind of a small business owner, right? It's like, I'm me, my business, my clients, my revenue. So like when it comes to invoicing, when it comes to how I generate documentation, like my whole business, I'm always trying to be like, what's the next iteration? What's the newest screw that I can tighten? What's the new enhancement that I can do for how I do this part of my business, not just the software development part. So start just thinking about that in other areas of your work as well.
I would say the same thing about if you're kind of completely new to the ecosystem, kind of focusing on that technical foundation first, and perhaps observing, learning, listening, and becoming better by ultimately making bad decisions or those mistakes. I think that's really important as well. Thinking about your own journey, and appreciate you kind of wear different hats when it comes to working with clients and Salesforce. If you were to start out again and in a role that kind of requires you to think more iteratively, is there anything you would change or do differently, do you think?
I would have liked to have been more okay with just doing a kind of napkin idea. I always felt like in the past, I always felt like I had to have this thing knocked out, like researched and like a tight little pitch and like resources and like this is a fully flushed thing ready to go versus instead just being like, I have this thought. I've thought about it a little bit, maybe done a little bit of feasibility and investigating and bouncing it around, and I still feel good about it. Now let me just pitch it to my supervisor of like, hey, I've been thinking about a better way for us to do billable logging for a client project. And setting up the tone of like, I'm here, meaning like I'm a 1 out of 5 with like flushing this thing out. This is very green, so don't crucify me with that. And just letting them know like, is something you care about, you're interested in. Here's kind of the high level idea. Here's where I'm at with it in my journey of how serious and fleshed out it is, and just want to like ideate with that person. And especially because being an independent consultant, it's like I became very quickly very aware of how isolating and it's just like me,
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
and losing that advantage. And I didn't do that enough back when I had teams around me to like, these are smart, hardworking people.
Mm.
I have all these ideas turning around, and I've got all these documents and spreadsheets and templates but it's just me in a silo. Like, what better way to iterate and feedback is to like just spit it half baked out to your team members, give them the right context and expectation setting, and let them make it even better. And I guarantee I think I would have had a much more successful career in those environments,
Mm.
because I would have been seen as the guy who is initiating and coming up with better ways to make the business and the team work better. Um,
Yeah.
so
Summarizing that in kind of one statement, really, feedback is a gift. Seek it, and you should benefit as a result, right? Do you think that's kind of a fair summary?
yeah,
Yeah.
and like feedback, but like in the iterative context is like
Mm.
evoking feedback yourself, initiating the feedback. A lot of times we wait to be given feedback in teams, right? Like our performance review's coming up, and I know I'm going to get some feedback, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just let my first client call. I know my PM is going to give me feedback, right? But
Mm.
I'm specifically initiating, invoking, soliciting feedback for the things going on in your head to help you refine the way that you think, the way that you
Yeah.
process, and to ultimately then get better on how you yourself self-iterate and become better.
If you were to summarize kind of key skills or attributes it took to be more iterative, are there any kind of bullet points or kind of things that come to mind on that, do you think?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, you've got to be okay with some risk and some ambiguity.
Mm.
And then I would say you also have to have a mindset of like improving. And so, Enneagram, I don't know if you know about Enneagrams. I'm improver basically. It's like whether I'm at a restaurant that I've been to for the first time or whatever, it's just like I always kind of have this lens of, oh, this is great, but if they had done this, like when instead a new app and I'm like, that's annoying. Why didn't that
Yeah.
auto populate? Like,
Mm.
and so just start looking for that. If that doesn't come to you naturally, start trying to build that habit of just like, and especially in the tech space, like I think going and seeking out new and interesting technology and being
Yeah.
like, okay, cool, Andrew, what would you do differently? What worked? What didn't? What could be better? And that'll help you build that out. And so, yeah, I think those are kind of three things. Is like building the habit of that mindset of like constant improvement,
Mhm.
and then being okay with ambiguity and assuming some risk, and then also just know that there will be some growing pains.
Yeah. Do you think part of it is about letting go of perfection?
Letting go of perfection, but I think more than that is being okay with knowing that it's not going to be good enough yet.
Mm.
In the sense that, like, there's this business case study I learned back in school where it's like they had adults try to do a mushroom and pasta tower, and they broke out into teams and who could build the tallest one using just marshmallows. Sorry, I said mushrooms. I think marshmallows and
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
sticks.
Yeah.
And then they did the same thing with the kindergarten class, and the kindergartners, like 90% of the time, did better than the working grown-up adults because the adults were so fixated on like getting one version to be perfect the first time. They were like planning it all out and da 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 da. Whereas the kindergartners were just like
Mhm.
break it and fail often and regularly, and then they
Yeah.
eventually just got to the better solution, without really thinking and over planning. So just know that version 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 still might not be good enough, but that's just part of the process. And once you lean into that and accept that and get your client on board with that concept,
Yeah.
that's important too. Because if they're expecting the old model, they're expecting UAT round 1 to look 90% basically there with some tweaks, right? Versus
Mhm.
and the same thing with that feedback to my coworkers. I've got to let my client know I'm going to give you this half baked solution, like just full, like Just
Yeah.
first few rounds is going to be very underbaked. It's going to be very not MVP, and it's just like we're just spitting out stuff, get feedback, spit out a new one, get feedback,
Mm.
pivot, maybe a new object, maybe a new page, maybe a new persona. It's just like everybody's just journeying down this path together, and we're all just trying to get it better and better with each new phase.
Yeah, definitely. And it's about that journey and kind of being along on the same journey with the client. You're both aiming towards the same thing, working towards the same goal, but you've got a number of different steps to get there. I think is kind of another way to think about it. So thinking about your experiences now and reflecting on perhaps when people hear about being iterative, they think of something that's a misconception. Is there anything about being more iterative that you'd like to kind of clarify for our audience?
I would say one thing is that you have no plan or direction. Like you're just saying,
Mm.
a goal, right? That we're going on this journey, this shared goal. Some people think of iterative as like we're just gonna throw it on the wall, see what sticks, and do it over
Yeah.
again, right? It's definitely not that. It's like just going with that metaphor. It'd be like we've never played darts before. We understand the rules of darts and the equipment and the distance, and we have everything we need, but we've never done it before. And we know the goal. We all know the goal is to like hit these points in a certain way to win the game, but we don't know the technique. We've never practiced before. And say it's you and your buddy, and you're just like at a bar, pub, or whatever, just throwing darts, literal darts,
Yeah.
and then let's just say you both were like, "Ooh, I like what you did there." You know, maybe one person held it like this versus the last person just threw it with their fist, and it's like helping each other improve, get there through that iterative process.
Just before we wrap up today's session, what's a way for people to connect with you? And do you have any particular pieces of content that have helped you on your journey to kind of being more iterative that you'd like to shout out as well?
Um, yeah, I would say, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me LinkedIn. I've got my Trailblazer community profile and my website, ermonconsulting.com. There's a way to reach out to me there. Happy to chat. I always say an old mentor told me about the Lux surface area, where it's every conversation or every new thing you check out or spend time on is opening up the potential for something great.
Thanks again for your time today. And hopefully, when this goes out, we will inspire some more people to be more iterative. So, thanks again.
Thank you. Nice talking with you.